All right, so it looks like we're live. Let me just do a quick refresh, make sure it's good. Hope everybody's doing well this morning. This is Paint with Lovejoy, and we are going to be doing a Tuscany landscape. Right on. Hey, Jen, good morning. Thanks for jumping on. Okay, so I think we are good to go. There we go, there's the refresh. Excellent. So today's painting, I will be using a palette knife and doing a landscape. So we're going to kind of scrape on some base colors. Then we'll do some little bit thicker impasto for some poppies in the foreground and some kind of cypress trees on the hilltops. And again, with any painting that I create, you are more than welcome to change it up, change colors, add your own elements, make it your own. So a little bit of what you're looking at on the screen, we do have a trace or our image drawn on here already. And I highly recommend that you pause the video, draw what you see on your canvas, and then start the video and follow along. If that's going to be too much frustration for you after the live feed, I will have a link and it's in the description box for a traceable. And a traceable is something that you can download, purchase, download, print out, and then with carbon paper, you will transfer your lines onto your canvas. And for my first time painters, that's a really nice way to get your composition on your canvas and take out some of the stress and frustration of painting getting your painting started. Sorry, I was a little distracted making sure I caught all the comments. All right, so jumping right in, I am going to start with a palette knife, and I'm using a smaller one because I am on an 8x10 canvas. If you want, if you have a larger knife like this one, feel free to use it, and you can use the smaller edge compared to the longer side if you want. If you don't have a palette knife, you can actually use an old credit card, and sometimes that's fun just to scrape and know that you're not using the card anymore, or anything with a hard plastic or hard ridge. And I do recommend those squeegee things, excuse me, those squeegee things when you get a screen protector for your phone, and it usually helps you push out the bubbles. Those are excellent alternative things to use instead of a palette knife. All right, so again, you can see I jumped right in. I've grabbed the yellow paint, and we are scraping on kind of thin layers. I'm not doing the impasto super thick. And I'm putting some of my first colors down. I'm going to need to be dry a little bit later when we add some elements on top of it. So with the palette knife, you might be able to hear it at home, but it is this kind of scraping method. So I am using some pressure. And it's applying a really thin layer on there. And we'll put a few extra layers on top of here, and it'll play with the color underneath. So it is a lot of fun. All right. And hi, Janet. Good morning. Thanks for jumping on. All right. So for the palette knife style, this is my traditional style for painting. And I kind of stumbled into it on accident taking a traditional palette knife painting class. And I like it because it is very therapeutic. This scraping method has definitely kept me de-stressed most of my life. And I do find that when I do get frustrated, irritated, anxious, especially given what's current circumstances are doing, this is kind of my go-to, and I feel better after I've completed a painting. So feel free to give it a try at home. And again, I'm still starting with the yellow. We're going to put it in one other spot, and then we'll be putting other colors on top of it. And as you're painting at home, feel free to turn the canvas sideways, turn it upside down, put it on your lap, whatever you need to do to get into those areas and maybe move or turn the knife in a different direction. I will keep this one the same orientation since it is a live video feed, so you guys can see what I'm doing at home. And if you prefer a blue sky instead of a yellow sunset like I'll be doing, feel free to switch this up. Make it your own. And if you are painting on a stretched canvas at home like I am doing, I do recommend that you carry that color over the sides, the tops, and the bottom. That way it looks nice when you hang it on your wall, having that wrap around the edge. And if you would like to see some of my traditional knife painting, go to lovejoycreations.com and you can check out my portfolio. And my paintings in my portfolio are going to have over 100 layers of paint scraped on them. So in today's video, we'll maybe get to maybe 2 or 3 layers, but you can layer acrylic paint over and over and over again. Now, a bit of note about acrylic paint: should you paint something in an area that you don't like it, don't freak out. You let the paint dry and you can just put another color on top of it. All right, and if you are used to my videos taking progress photos, here's a good spot to take a progress photo. And I'm still using the knife. I'm going to go in with green, and we're going to go over some of our yellow areas and this other little hill area over here. And again, using that same pressure, you can see the yellow mixing underneath as we scrape this green on there. And this is part of the fun of this style of painting. And I like this style of painting because I consider it a bit sloppy style. And like I said earlier, just super, super therapeutic. And it's kind of nice to just train your brain in new areas of maybe you've never held a palette knife, maybe you've never done the scraping method, and your brain takes in all this new information and goes, oh, that's kind of cool. That's fun. Oh, let's try that again. So enjoy this. You are just a creative individual right now. You have no age, you have no stresses right now, you have no worries, and just create. So for this bottom hill, I'm actually going to leave some of the yellow on the top because I do want this one to be a little bit lighter in the foreground compared to this hill in the back that we just filled up with all of our green. And I'm going to put one other color on this other hill before we do our green. Whoops. Sorry about that. I thought I taped it down. And if you have any anxiety, frustrations, literally just put it into your canvas, scrape it away, and we won't solve your problems, but we at least make you feel a little bit better about it. So now I'm grabbing that raw sienna, that light brown. And we're going to put this on here as the base coat, and then I'll put the green on top of it. All right, and I hope everybody's having a good week. I do know that the news is saying that this is going to be the intense week for the country, and I do hope that everybody can have the supplies that they need, able to work from home, so that way we can recover on a swifter course rather than a later one. I do know that we will never go back to the same normal that we used to have, but we will develop a new normal. And that's kind of like painting. Whoops, sorry for the shaking camera. Once you learn something in painting, you really can't go back to unlearning it. So you just kind of add those skills as you move forward with life. So I'm actually going to move up to the mountain now. We'll come back and put the green on this hill down here. But I'm going to start with blue, get that base color on there, and then we'll go over it with purple. I did very specifically in today's painting make sure that we're not using black. Again, one of the things that they train us in art school is to create your painting using all the colors except black. White you can add to a color to tone down and get a different tint. But you should be able, with knowing your colors well enough, to create super dark shadow areas by overlapping specific colors. And you'll see that when we overlap the purple on top of this blue, it creates it's actually a really pretty purplish blue. But the more that you paint, the more you learn what colors you can combine to get what we call sometimes cool shadows. And that's going to be a shadow with blues and purples and greens in it. And cool shadows tend to recede, push back. And then you've got warm shadows where maybe there's some red in it, and that kind of pulls them forward a little bit more. Reds, yellows, and oranges in the shadows. Very, very muted. But generally when you're painting on a flat surface, you're a magician. You're creating this depth of a 3D object on a flat 2D surface. And learning your value scale and color combos is what helps create that depth, making this feel like it's forward compared to the mountains and the sky being pushed further back. Oh no, Jen, you gotta make, well, at least you're making masks, but yeah, you do need to get back into painting. And actually, I might send you an email because I'm in need of a mask or two. I've just got a bandana that's rather thin, and based on what I read this morning, I need something thicker. So I'll send you an email. All right, so going back to the green, I'm going to go back on top of the raw sienna, that light brown. And again, it's kind of cool to see that we put the raw sienna on first compared to the hill to the left of it where we put the yellow on first. And notice how the color looks different. The green looks different on the raw sienna compared to the green on top of the yellow. And this is part of that layering and just playing with colors that I was talking about. And again, we use the exact same color, but this green looks different with the yellow underneath it compared to this green with the brown underneath it. And there are artists like myself that spend their entire career playing with this kind of color transition. All right, so let's see. We are at what we call our underpainting, where there's no canvas space left. So now we're going to start putting layers on top of it. And I'm going to go back up to the mountain with our purple and scrape right on top of that. And this is going to make it pretty dark because I'm not diluting or changing the shade of the purple. And it's going to mix with the blue. All right, and this one, because I am using student grade paint and it's a bit on the transparent side, and I want this mountain to be pretty dark, I'm not using as much pressure as I scrape, so that way the purple can hold a little bit more opaque. Again, totally your call, how much purple or blue you want showing through on your painting. And again, if you're painting that canvas with the stretched sides, just kind of remember to carry it around the edge. It's easier to do it now while you're working with the color than trying to kind of color match or recreate your layers later on. All right, and I actually want a little something a little darker on the top, but I didn't put orange on here, so we're actually going to make our own. So I'm going to put that yellow aside, and a tiny amount of red is going to go a long way to make our shade of orange. So it is easier to start off light, and I think I might, actually it's pretty close. But since I'm going to be scraping it on top of the yellow, I'm going to go just a touch darker, and again, just grabbing that small amount, and it's easier to start light and work darker compared to going too dark and then trying to add a ton of your lighter color to tone it down. You're better off just making a brand new pile at that point. Oh, good question. So the question was, do I paint flat on the surface all the time, or do I paint on an easel? I actually do both. I actually prefer to paint vertical, so on an easel or on a secured surface, just so I can see and step back and look at it from a distance. But mainly because I do paint with the knife and then I'm usually working on a couple paintings at the same time, I do tend to paint flat, scrape a couple layers on there, move to another painting, scrape some more layers, and just kind of go back and forth. And it's more just because of the studio that I was in, I didn't have enough wall space to have easels around the corner, around the room, or to be painting directly on the wall. So whatever you feel comfortable with, stick with that. And again, try a few different ways to see what works for you. I would say if you're doing more brush work, an easel is a bit more ideal, again, so you can kind of see it the way it would be hung on the wall, and then you can step back and move forward from it as well. Oh, nice. And we got a new question from, I'm not going to sure if I'm going to pronounce that right. It's Plibly Gotcha. Sorry for messing that up. But the question is, do I like knives or brushes better? I personally prefer the palette knife, more so for the fact because I like the scraping method, and I hated cleaning my brushes and I hated mixing paint. So with my style scraping method, I basically would just grab a color out of the tube, scrape it on there, and then scrape more colors on top of it. So now I'm grabbing the yellow and scraping it back on top of the yellow and the kind of sherbety orange color I just applied. So with the fact that I always liked the palette knife more, My karma and joke that I used to tell all my palette knife and all my paint your pet students was, now that I'm a teacher and in my classes, I generally, for the paint your pet class, I mixed your colors and I cleaned your brushes. So that was my karma. Unfortunately, I am no longer in my Liberty Station studio, rolling with the changes of the world and trying to stay relevant and current and pay my bills. I don't think I'll be cleaning your brushes nearly as much since I am moving to virtual and online classes, and you get to mix your own colors now. So maybe my karma came full circle. But either way, it's still really good for you to get comfortable mixing your own colors and everything. All right, so let's see. We have our sky's pretty done. I do like where the mountain is. I'm going to put a little bit more of a shadow right on this mountain. So I'm going to go back to that raw sienna. I'm going to scrape it on top on the corner. And again, this just kind of helps push this more yellow mountain or hill forward a little bit more into the foreground. And then I'm going to do one more layer of green on that middle hill. All right, and one more layer of green. Not bad. And now that I'm in my home studio and I'm seeing the light is not nearly as good as my studio, so I'm gonna have to be setting up some light. So if the light is changing on the video, I apologize. All right, so let's see. Now we've got some poppy flowers that we're gonna put on here, and then we're gonna kind of use our knife in more impasto style, put some rows of like the winery, we'll put some cypress trees up on top, and may or may not add some houses. I'm not quite sold on the houses yet. All right, so for poppies down here, really lots and lots of fun. We're literally just going to be putting little blobs on there. And I will show two different methods. I'll show with the brush and with the palette knife. So again, with this being a little more impasto style, thicker, we're going to grab a big chunk and literally just make little dots for our poppies. They can overlap, they can be different sizes. If you prefer to use a brush, oh, let me get a little bit of water on here. If you prefer to use a brush, same thing. You're literally just gonna make little blobs. So whichever one you feel like doing, and imagining again that this is a field of poppies. They're overlapping, they're blowing in the wind, they're different shapes, different sizes. I'm gonna go back to the knife on this one. And as you're doing it with the knife or even the brush, get in the habit of kind of moving your the angle of your brush in different places, so that way each poppy doesn't look identical as you get into a groove of going across your canvas. If you even want to use the back end of your brush, that makes kind of nice dots as well. And have a few of them almost going off the edges of the page, so that way you don't have a nice border. You do want to imagine that, you want to have the viewer imagine that your painting is much larger, the scene is much larger than the canvas. So by having some of your elements move off or halfway on the canvas, that tells the brain of the viewer that there's so much more to see than what was actually captured in the painting or the photograph. And those of you using student grade paint, if you are painting this kind of thick, mine is student grade paint, it will flatten a little bit. You're not going to keep all of this texture. And that's just the nature of using student grade paint, so don't freak out. If you are inclined to get more into palette knife painting and the impasto, the thicker style, I would recommend investing in heavy body acrylic paint. And then that way you can kind of keep that texture, that thickness. But heavy body acrylic paint is on the more expensive side. And you will end up using a lot more paint too because it is so thick. All right. right, I'm actually going to throw some more green on my plate so we can get more of those cypress trees. We'll have to put some highlights on those. There we go. And again, this one you can do with the brush or the knife. I'm going to use it with the knife. And I'm actually going to utilize the shape of my knife to where it's kind of a little fatter down here and then skinnier up top. I'm going to kind of get a good blob on it and then use that for, we'll see if it'll work, use that for just basically the shape. So I'm actually just holding it there, level, touching it to the canvas, and pulling it right back. We will do this with a little bit of the white, or I mean the yellow, to give it some highlights. Because again, on that dark surface with the purple, they don't stand out nearly as much. So if this is too much, you can do it with a brush. And you can have a lot of trees in your painting, none at all, your call how many you want to add. Let's see, we've got a few down here. Remember to breathe. Again, just realized I was holding my breath. And get in the habit, as you are getting into this a little bit more, to look at your painting from a distance of about 4 to 5 feet away. And that is the normal viewing distance for most things in life. So make sure that you are checking out your artwork from that distance as well. And with this thicker paint, it will take closer to probably 30 minutes for it to dry. And then, like I said, it will flatten out a little bit. All right, so I'm actually going to do a yellow-green mixture. And actually, I'm just going to mix the rest of that yellow, and I'm going to put a new blob of yellow in there later. All right, and here we're going to have like almost like rows, like a vineyard. So I am kind of angling it so it can curve with the hill, but just doing this little tapping method. And you can kind of pick up some of the paint and manipulate it along. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's just an impression of what we're looking at. And let me add some more yellow to my plate. And we're going to go back up to those cypress trees and add some highlights on there. And it is going to mix and squish a little bit with the color underneath. So again, grabbing some of that yellow. And I am imagining that the sun is coming from the left-hand side. So on the left-hand side of each of these, I'm going to put a little bit of yellow. And I'm right now just kind of placing it on there. I'm going to go back and kind of squish it in a moment. But on the left side of each of where my trees are, we're putting this little highlight value. And if you need to, wipe your knife off or your brush off before you grab that yellow. Because if you've been painting with me for a while or painting for a little bit, you will know that your lighter colors get eaten up rather quickly in the darker colors. All right, so now I'm actually going to take the knife and kind of squish a little bit of that yellow color into the green. And each one of you might have a slightly different method, but you definitely want to kind of keep the light pressure. And if you end up losing that, just grab some more yellow and reapply. Trust your instincts. You're a 5-year-old. You know more about this than you realize. And again, it's just an impression. You know, our brain really doesn't need a whole lot of details to get the concept of an image. It just basically needs to see the light and shadows, and our brain fills in the rest. And the more you train your brain to look at stuff, the quicker you see it and the quicker you recognize it. So no matter what, we can always learn new things. And so I'm doing the same thing on these rows where our winery would be, our vines. But this one I'm not going to blend in as much since it's already such a light green on there. Okay. And let's see, I actually want to go back and add more poppies. And I'm going to overlap those poppies just a little bit more. So let me grab some red paint. And I think we might add some clouds in the sky. All right, so do wipe that brush off because you don't really want your green and your red mixing together. They're complementing colors, so when you mix complementing colors, it's not so pretty of a color. But that is how one of the ways that you can get those dark colors that I was talking about at the beginning of the video. All right, so feel free to overlap your poppies. I want to say this was a really healthy spring, so there's an abundance of it. Maybe it's a super bloom. But given that we can't really go out and explore the hiking trails right now, I want to have abundant flowers in here. And again, totally okay if you overlap some of the dots. Again, have some coming off the edge. All right. And if you have time and you so would want to put a little black dot in the center of each of your poppies, it again just kind of gives a hint that you have more depth there and that the poppies kind of are coming out of a center base, but completely optional. Most everybody is still going to look at this and go, oh, field of red poppies, how cool. When I taught this painting earlier, quite a few years ago, I did have people that put different colors in there of wildflowers in there. They don't have to just be red poppies, so feel free to make this your own. And as you're painting at home, please email me photos of what you paint. I really enjoy receiving those and just hearing your comments and how much you thought you couldn't paint before, but now you realize you can. It's awesome. So please send me an email, paintwithlovejoy@gmail.com, or tag me in social media, and it's either @ or #paintwithlovejoy. And I do try to search for those and then post them on my Instagram story. And I think once YouTube, I get up to 10,000 subscribers, then I can start doing the stories on YouTube as well. All right. So I think for the clouds, I'm actually going to use a brush just because I like that effect a little bit more. So cleaning my brush out really good, we're going to use white paint. And we're going to go back to that stabbing method that I've done in a few other videos. And again, another therapeutic brush application. So I'm actually going to go ahead and just do that stabbing method a little bit on a clean part of my paper or a clean part of your paper towel, because what that's doing is starting to spread those bristles apart. And when we're making clouds or even the white caps on a rolling wave, being able to do this to your brush is to your benefit. So I'm going to be grabbing that white, and again, you can just practice on here because we're going to be going with a method like this. And we're going to be putting clouds in our sky. So I'm going to try to do it angled so you can see how I'm applying them. And as you do this, I do kind of twirl my brush as I'm hitting the canvas because again, like I said with the poppies, you don't want the exact same mark across all of it. We want to have some variation. So I am kind of twirling the brush in my fingers as I'm adding the clouds and just creating kind of a blob shape for the cloud. If you want to turn your cloud into a specific shape, go right ahead. All right, and because clouds have a hint of shadow, and I don't have black, so I'm going to use blue. We're going to make actually a rather light blue, so tiny, tiny, tiny amount of blue goes a long way, and that's still even darker than I want. So toning it down. And then on the bottom of that cloud, we're going to add a hint of that shadow with a light blue. And if you don't feel like doing this to your clouds, you do not have to. I will go back over it one more time with the white. Okay, so I did clean the brush out, Kind of pulling those bristles apart again, and definitely grabbing just the pure white. And then same thing on top of the clouds. And even if that blue, that shadow, doesn't really shine through super bold, there's still a hint of it there, and that gives us some shape to our cloud. All right, so that gets us at about 30 minutes. And like I said, have been practicing to keep them at about 30 minutes because I have a few other, I guess, special appearance events coming up in the next 2 months. So I just want to make sure that I'm working within their time frame. So I appreciate you guys allowing me to practice and joining and checking out everything. So feel free to leave a comment in the description box below or in the comment section below about what you want me to paint in the future. I am getting a calendar and a list out for the next 2 weeks, and we'll possibly figure out something on the website where I can get more suggestions that way. But please keep painting at home. Send me your pictures, email them to me. Find ways to deal with this social distancing and isolation. And it is much better to be creative than staring at an electronic device or listening to the news 24/7. So after you've taken your dog for the 10,000th walk of the day, come back in and get creative and paint something. So I will see everybody tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Thank you so much for joining me and hanging out. And until next time, take care. Cheers.